excited about the chance to learn a little more about Holacracy, and pleased to be on a new MacBook Air that actually works. So.
All right, Tom. Very good. Welcome. And Chris Harold.
I'm checking in.
You mean Brian Harold?
Oh. No, Chris Harold.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I'm checking in with a little frustration at my abysmal score, and I'm looking forward to a lot more clarity than I've been able to achieve on my own so far. And I'm in with that. And I'm happy to see my friends.
Oh, welcome. Thanks for being here. Brian Harold.
Okay, Brian Harold checking in from California as well. Frustrated over the internet connection, and awesome to be here at the meetings in California. With that, I'm in.
And I'm gonna. There you go. And Chris Bozer.
Checking in this morning. What's got my attention is. For some reason right now, I have two clients that can't seem to honor any sort of boundaries as far as keeping a schedule goes. And I'm really been struggling. It caused me to miss Wednesday's first one because they didn't show up for an appointment they're supposed to. And then I'm continuing to get text messages about what they want to do this afternoon. And I've been very clear in explaining that anyway. So I'm feeling a little bit of frustration this morning, and I'm definitely looking forward to this. I'm in.
Oh, thank you. And Mr. Jarvis.
Yeah, thank you, Keith Jarvis, dog. I'm checking in just with also a lot of frustration about the technology, the sort of thing I allow to get under my skin quite a bit. It's been frustrating to not have reliable internet connection here at the facility. So I know that's going to have some effect on the efficacy of our call, and I will rely on the fact that we have a good solid recording of the first week session. So if something gets weird during the presentation and discussion today, that video is going to be made available to all of us as well. So I'm just going to relax into that and allow it to be what it is. And grateful to Boysen for coming on and being available, especially if this signal just mysteriously drops. Boysen, you started, right? Okay. So yeah, thank you. I just want to start off with a little bit of a disclaimer. Nobody at MKP is an expert really in Holacracy. We're students. We're students of this concept and this structure. And that's why we're calling this a study group. We are not licensed providers of Holacracy material. We do have a number of certified practitioners now, individuals who, through group study, have passed the certification test that you all took as part of gauging the depth of complexity of the subject matter. And the concepts, the intellectual property of Holacracy is open source. So Holacracy One, the founding organization, encourages individuals and organizations to take the material and educate themselves to the best of our abilities. So they kind of call that bootstrapping, and that's what we're endeavoring to do through this group study. So that's just a reminder, we're not authorities. If you ask a really hard question that we don't have the answer to, we'll say, that's a good question. Let's learn about that together. The rest of the material, as you learned in the first week homework, is really not all Socratic. It isn't a didactic presentation. Even today, what we're going to do is review the material in kind of a pop quiz discussion format. In weeks 2 and 3 in particular, we'll have simulation of some of the processes in Holacracy. And in week 4, we'll either do more simulation or a very deep dive into impact, question and answer. So this isn't all going to be lecture. This isn't going to be, your eyes glaze over while I speak. Brian Robertson, the founder of Holacracy, likes to say, it's a good metaphor, that if you were trying to teach soccer, you wouldn't just hand somebody the rule book and say, go. In fact, you'd give them just a little bit of direction, saying, this is the ball, that's your goal, that's their goal. Kick it, don't use your hands. And then the rest of the rules would be described over time, situationally, and you learn it more organically. We have been doing Holacracy in our circle since August of 2014, and I can say from experience that it really needs practice to get concepts ingrained and to begin to adopt it as a working methodology. So this 4-week cycle is really not intended to produce out of box a group of experts. Any questions about how that is going to work for us in the 4 weeks, or the structure that you didn't get, either how it works document or in my little exposition right there before we go into the content?
Keith, I'm going to ask, are you hearing us in an ear, in the bud that's in your ear?
I am.
Because we're all hearing an echo on everything you say. So I'm just checking that out. And I see Brian is muted, so it's not picking up his speaker. He's muted through the other thing. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Keith.
Yeah, I can't figure why that's happening. No.
So I have a wacky suggestion, which would be for...
We just dump the connection and say audio only?
Yes, that's one suggestion. The other suggestion is Harold's laptop has not made a single glitch, and when his audio was on, his audio was clean. And we could practice eminent domain and just take over Brian Harold's laptop.
I don't know what you mean. Tell me what you want to do.
Have Brian hand you his headset or use his microphone. Because when his channel was open, we were getting clean audio.
So you want me to leave the meeting as the video participant, stay on with the phone or not?
No, dump the phone. The audio is what's bad. Your video connection's fine. It's the audio is terrible. Sorry, guys.
That's all right. It's the nature of the beast.
Get a little closer. Don't be shy.
All right. Can you guys hear?
Testing.
Oh, that's so much better. Yes.
Okay. I will endeavor to work like this, and if it continues to be a problem, and again, I'm sorry guys, but we do have a bad source.
That sounds good.
We have video from Tuesday. Yes, proceed. Okay. Okay, great. So, yeah, the videos hopefully presented some of the concepts, some of the basic concepts of Holacracy. And I'm just going to ask you if you could throw out in your own words or something that you absorbed, just a layman's definition or description of what you think it might be. What is Holacracy?
For me, it's all about individual empowerment to make decisions as long as it's within what I'm responsible for.
I think that's accurate. And what we'll find is other people might have different words that could also be accurate. And we have a thought about that. You know, one of the
more thoughts
that we used, is that creating an additional echo? One of the descriptions that we have heard is that it's a self-managed system for organizations. I think that's accurate as well. It's a way to have an organization dynamically and rapidly respond to live conditions. So, you know, that may also be true in other organizations that might have like a boss hierarchy, but perhaps not as effectively as what's available in Holacracy. Any other thoughts about how you might describe it to others in an elevator speech?
I'm thinking of a sense of an organic structure, responsive to the moment. Yeah.
That's excellent. And, you know, I think one of the great models of what a holacratic organization might look like is the human body. It is organic, and it's responding in the moment to live tensions. I ate something bad. I have to vomit it out, right? I mean, is that not live tension in the moment, dynamically driven? And another way is about how I'm not constantly micromanaging the process of the bone marrow creating white blood cells. That's happening autonomously. It's delegated. The authority to do that happens locally.
Yeah, I mean, delegated authority is the piece that comes up for me.
Yeah, it's having the authority at the level where the responsibility lies. So from the video, we also I gave a couple of thoughts on what holacracy is not. What from that resonated? What is it not?
Full consensus.
It's definitely not consensus.
Not anarchy.
It isn't, because, you know, just because there is no boss doesn't mean it's a chaos free-for-all. In fact, it has a very rigorous structure. So it's not consensus, and it's not a free-for-all. It's also not a majority rule. I don't have to get you to agree with me. So some of the politicking, which is part of human nature, that goes on in organizations where I try to get you to buy into my idea. Now, some of that communication is still exceptionally valuable to make sure that you understand and I understand and we work well together. But if you don't agree with what I'm doing, if I have the authority to do it, I don't really need you to agree. So the majority rule approach is also not part of holacracy. So one of the core word of holacracy is holon, and that's a self-managing unit. And that can happen, you know, that could be a person, it could be the cell of a body. It really just means an entity that's capable of taking action and pursuing a purpose. So holon, holarchy, holacracy. And in holacracy, that smallest unit, the holon, is called role. And basically, it's sort of like a flexible job description. Flexible in meaning that it can evolve in response to needs. If I'm in a role and I'm pursuing the purpose, I'm doing the things, I may need to tweak what I have to do. I may need to change its definition in response to live conditions. What are the parts of a role? And this was covered in that video. What of the parts of the role do you recall, and what do they mean?
Remember, there's 3 parts. two of which were required. One was optional. I remember that part.
Totally right. He's nailed that much. Okay, so we've got purpose, accountability. I just saw a little warning on my screen. Purpose, accountability, those are the 2 required. And domain is the 3rd and optional. And here's a way that I find really useful in describing it. Are we there? Are they there? Are we there? See, they're all frozen.
No, you're here. We hear you.
Thank you. So purpose is like the vision part of the MKP mission statement. The way the world would be if my little boy's deepest needs were being met. That's a vision. The purpose in a role definition is the desired outcome. If that role is fully functional, the purpose is the desired outcome. The action of the mission statement, the things that I'm doing to make the world like my little boy wants it to be, is like the accountability part of a role definition, those ongoing actions that I take in pursuit of the purpose. So, you know, there's a great deal of correlation between the MKP mission statement, which you've probably seen, vision plus action equals mission from the mission statement process, protocol. That's the same thing in purpose plus accountability equals role definition. Understand? Any thoughts about that and how similar they are?
I do have a question on that, actually. With the accountability, with the term being used as ongoing action is what I heard. So basically how the desired outcome is reached. What happens to somebody in that who is not living up to the responsibilities of their role? How are they held accountable if they're not holding themselves accountable?
Well, that's part of the rigorous structure, the rigorous adherence to Constitution, that they're required to self-manage, self-process. All the other members of the circle are also bound to process with them if they are not meeting their accountabilities and therefore having an impact. I am required to engage you about it. And then thirdly, what we'll get to a little bit later about the lead link is responsible for assigning individuals to roles and to managing the efficacy of that assignment. So if I'm not meeting accountabilities, for example, in a role, the lead link of my circle can engage me about that and do a replacement. You know, I mean, we might think of that in a traditional organization as, okay, you're fired from that job.
Okay.
Democracy thinks of it more as, that's not a good fit between the role and the soul. So we're going to reassign that to someone else.
Okay. Thank you.
Would issues of addressing tensions be part of that as well?
Absolutely.
Someone's not taking on the responsibility that creates those tensions.
That's how it works for us. And you know, my observation, and I've been part of the online community at Holacracy One. That's the stuff that gets reported all the time. How am I going to engage about this tension? How am I going to get my colleague X isn't taking care of Y? How should I approach that? And that's exactly it. I am bound. I have a responsibility. It's not just watch your brother, so to speak, do support accountability, MKP kind of language, but I'm required constitutionally to let you know when your inaction is impacting me. The third part of a role definition is called domain. It's not required, but it's often very useful. We can kind of think of that as the location that the work happens. A territory, an asset, a tool, a system, a database, a banking account, and the authority to make decisions in relation to that. Any thoughts of what a domain might be in, say, a gas station? If the gas station is your business, what might be some of the domains?
Cash register.
Cash register.
The pump.
They're all of the things that are core functionality to the business are things that somebody probably has to have some final authority over. The bookkeeper, the financial manager, maybe the cash register. The pump, maybe there's a facilities manager or a fuel manager making sure that
Underground storage tanks.
underground storage tanks, the maintenance, right? So there's stuff about the responsibility, and then there's stuff about the authority to make decision in relation to that tool, item. In the video, we talked about a company car, perhaps, is a good example of a domain that someone may need to make decisions about. Every now and then I just shut up and listen. So purpose, accountability, and domain. And we're going to talk a little bit more about domain in week 4 in particular, because it can be a little bit of a trap, assigning domains where they're not absolutely necessary, because a lot of the domains, a lot of the territories that we do work together in, we all actually need some sort of access to. So sometimes, especially when we did this in August of 2014, we affectionately call it the Great Land Grab of Racine, Wisconsin 2014, where we assigned a whole bunch of domains that, you know, later we kind of said, we don't know if it really needed to be recorded in that way, quite that specifically, because this topic here is more like community property. And this thing over here is more like team decision property. And I don't know if it really needs to be assigned. Holacracy would say, wait until it's attention that one role has to have final authority, and only then make the domain part of the decision. Still, in the introduction to the concepts, that's pretty detailed. You got a comment?
Parenthetically, now as a team, we are going back and undoing a lot of that great land grab, domain grab. We're taking them down. We're collapsing some of the things that we fleshed too much in the beginning.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just real quick, you're talking about domains, and I guess as I apply it to me as an area administrator, with the levels of availability of volunteers and things, I find myself continuing to absorb more and more and more domains. Is that, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but is there somebody in the circle that if we're using Holacracy in a volunteer model, is there just somebody who eventually comes in and scoops up some of those domains, or even some of the accountabilities based upon the fact that there's others that are not necessarily completely held to them? Or
well, to me, you know, I'm hearing sort of that you're experiencing a lot of tension about unmet either accountabilities and responsibilities, and then who's holding the bag, because a lot of times we experience domain as sort of like a responsibility.
right.
And it is, because if I have the authority of the thing, I have to tell you, when you come to ask me, can I borrow that? Can I use that? I have to say yes, no. And if I'm getting all of that all the time, that's a burden.
Sure.
So that sounds to me like you've got a lot of great opportunity to redefine what domains need to actually be assigned and which ones don't.
Right. I guess, at least in my experience and with the areas close to us, it seems more systemic than unique to where I am, I guess. And I'm thinking as the application of this to a volunteer run organization with very, very few of us that are actually paid staff. Anyway, I'm in a application space that probably.
Yeah, you are, and it's valuable because, you know, as we brace these concepts, we start to think about the application, and I think that that's one of our unique challenges that we're working on right now as we're integrating volunteers into support services circles. And what level of expectation can that support service circle have from volunteer member filling this role and paid contractor here maybe, or employee over there? And there's probably different thresholds of commitment. And
Okay.
So that's a live tension for us organizationally on how we apply this.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So, you know, you also heard me even just now say something about soul and role. How and why does Holacracy, the structure, differentiate soul from role? Do you remember anything about that in the video?
Well, more than one person can hold a role.
That's exactly
Or
right.
One person can hold more than one role.
Both are true, right? I hold right now I think 18 roles. I hold right now 18 roles. And they're kind of like just, you know, it's that little job description. I'm filling that niche and this niche and that responsibility. And one role can have multiple souls. And I think the best example of that is a for-profit sales rep. You know, the sales rep job is identical, whether it's in Albuquerque or Lauderdale. It's just the location that's different. So that one role can be assigned to multiple individuals. What might be the benefit of having a bit of a differentiation between soul and role in this construct? You know, I think for me is that it seems impersonal at first glance. It might seem impersonal at first glance, but that in truth it allows for greater personal space. If I can focus just on the role that you fill and how that role is working or not working for the team or organization, then it can take the interpersonal and set it to the side. Not diminish it, but set it to the side. And then we can hash out what's going on with the role and what the responsibilities ought to be and what the authorities ought to be. And then go back and have that reconnection. The interpersonal really isn't at play here. If you recall in the video, I mentioned that the 4 levels of multicultural format, the visions that we use in the issues and isms, there's personal, interpersonal, cultural, and institutional, right? And those are all happening all the time. And so this allows us just to have a little greater clarity on what's going on here. Is it really an interpersonal conflict? Am I just having a problem with you or you with me? That let's go and hash that out. Or is this role specific? And Holacracy says, address the role, and that way there's space for the soul. Any comments or thoughts about that?
I was struck by the idea that there's a kind of democratic quality to no one role is regarded as superior to another, so that my personal worth is not necessarily invested in the role. I can be asked to step down from a role and not feel like I'm diminished or demoted or I have fallen from grace, or however you want to put the sense that I'm no longer at the top of the organization, right? I've been relegated to some lower arena.
It isn't even playing field. All role fillers have the same responsibilities. They have the same duties and obligations to the team. And to follow the Constitution, we're playing by the same rule book. And the hierarchy of power, or what I call the hierarchy of person, where Sam is the supervisor of Fred and he supervises Candace and she supervises, that's all person and power. And this allows us to have a hierarchy of purpose, which is vision focused, it's outcome focused, it's solution focused. And it doesn't diminish the personal side, it just sets it into a different space. Do you recall, and I already think we may have hit up, how someone gets into a role, how a role gets established with the person?
It's assigned by the lead link.
It is. It's totally assigned by the lead link. Do I get to say no if you ask me to do it?
Not if I'm the lead link.
I love that.
I do not recall.
Yeah, I mean, it's an agreement, right? I'm not just, you are that, you have no choice. It's like an at-will work agreement, right? I think you would be a great fit for this role. Are you willing to accept it? Yes. Okay, great. You are that person. At any time, you could feel a tension about this doesn't fit for me anymore. Or if I was the lead link, I could say, wow, you know, this isn't working out great. Maybe that person would be better over here, and this person would be better in that role. And then just do a difference in the assignments. But the lead link is responsible to make those decisions, and then it's agreed upon. There are a couple of roles that are elected by members of the circle, but you're already in the circle as another role or appointed by the lead link to be in the circle. We'll hit that in the governance week, we agree. What's the difference between a role and a circle? The only real
Is it the
difference.
circle
Yeah, go
a
ahead.
collection of roles? The circle is as a collection of roles, or within a given circle, there's assigned roles?
Encapsulation is what I was coming up with.
They're both, yeah, because when a role has to become a circle is when it has become so complex and it's serving so many purposes, it's kind of so broad that it needs to be divided up. It's just too complicated. And then it becomes multiple roles. And as soon as that role becomes a circle, then it has to operate under the rules of holacracy. It has to hold tactical meetings and governance meetings. It has to have a lead link and a facilitator and a secretary. And most times also has to have a rep link. We talked a little bit about the lead link. What's the job of the facilitator?
They ensure process is happening, if I remember right.
That is pretty true, right? If I'm the facilitator, and I am right now of the lead operating circle, I have to lead the constitutionally required meetings. There's tactical meetings and governance meetings. And I don't just lead them, any which way that I want to. A facilitator, not quite the same as leading your process in iGroup. I have a process that I have to follow. Next week we'll be doing the tactical meeting process, and the following week the governance meeting process. And I have to follow that process pretty rigorously. Brian Robertson, I love quoting him because he invented this stuff, said the facilitator's job is to be more stubborn than the most stubborn participant. And I don't know if you've been in meetings where somebody, intentionally or unintentionally kind of hijacks the agenda, or they go off topic. It's just like sometimes a battle of wills. And now the facilitator is also aided by the fact that all the members know they have to follow the facilitator's guidance. They have to go through the processes in that same way. So it helps to re-establish the fact that just because there's no boss and hierarchy here, doesn't mean chaos. I'm the facilitator. I have to follow the procedure. Secretaries. Yeah, any other thoughts about facilitator? Okay, I thought I cut someone off. Secretary. What does the secretary's job require?
Interprets the Constitution.
Big gold star. Yeah, the secretary is not just taking minutes or recording the decisions. That's true. They also schedule meetings upon request. But their big gig, the one thing that makes this really unique and different, is that the secretary is interpreting governance and the Constitution. So what that can mean is a number of times during a meeting, someone will say, hey, whose authority is that right now? I don't know. Is that you, or is that, hey, secretary, will you take a look and tell us? And the secretary goes and looks at the governance and say, hey, the way it is right now, I read it that the authority to do that is in this role. And if it isn't clear, the secretary can say, it isn't clear right now, but based on what I'm reading of the purposes, it's this role, and I think somebody should bring a governance proposal.
So what if there was conflict with, if someone disagreed with the secretary's interpretation?
Yeah.
So in your speak, that's tension, right? So how is that resolved? Is the secretary the ultimate czar? And, if the secretary makes a mistake, so how does that dynamic work?
That's exactly right in both cases, that it is a tension for me if the secretary rules different than what I want or think. And the secretary's interpretation rules. So what that means is, and the final authority is the anchor circle secretary. So if I'm in a subcircle and I think that our secretary isn't interpreting it right, I can appeal to the parent circle's secretary. But ultimately, the secretary is the interpreter. We were thinking about it in Tuesday. It's a little bit like the U.S. government. You've got three branches: executive, legislative, and Supreme Court. Well, the secretary is kind of like making a ruling and interpreting the Constitution, right? And then which is which? We kind of argued on Tuesday. Executive, I think, is probably the lead link because they're guiding and they're saying the direction and the priorities, and legislative is facilitator. But the separation of powers is similar, and the way that it kind of reinforces that this isn't a hierarchy of power and person, that there's no one boss making a big decision. If I'm elected secretary for this 3 or 6 month term, you're going to have to go with my interpretation. Any thoughts?
And can the lead link then unelect a secretary?
No.
So you're stuck if you have a bad secretary for the term.
You're not. So what could be done is if anybody thought, so-and-so is not doing a good job in any of the elected positions, facilitator, secretary, or rep link, they could say, I have a tension about the job performance of the secretary, and I want to hold an election right away. And then either the same person gets elected or someone else gets elected.
So it's like a recall.
It's an instant recall election.
Got it.
But you're right. The lead link can't just say, no. The job assignment authority for lead link is only for the created roles, not the constitutionally required roles.
Got it.
Sweet. Okay. You've heard me talk about responsibilities. Any of those from the homework session, role responsibilities and duties come to mind? What responsibilities do I have when I fill a role in Holacracy? I must pursue my purpose. I must fulfill my accountabilities. Now, those are the parts that we already talked about with the role definition itself. But then if I have a domain or domains, I must exercise authority. Basically, that means you come to me and say, hey, you have authority over this. Can I do that? And I have to say yes or no. The unique part, in addition to those, that we might think of kind of naturally because of our use of accountability and the whole, did you get a packet in the mail, and accountability work in iGroups. The additional responsibilities in Holacracy are to process tensions. And so what might that mean? We're going to talk about that in a lot of detail next week, but give us some foreshadow.
It's like being willing to listen to a tension. And I think not necessarily act on it, but listen. That was a piece that was a little unclear to me, that I guess there's a process to deal with someone who listens to tensions but doesn't do anything about them. I mean, that seems to be the piece that's a little loose in my understanding right now. That, you know, if I hear you, you know, that's what I keep doing, but I don't do anything about it. So, you know, how does that context up?
Man, that is the live working ground of holacracy. That is the integration of that's the nexus point of holacracy. Let's break that down just a little bit first. So yes, I have to process my own tensions. I feel tense about this thing. There's a gap between where it ought to be and where it is now, and I've got to do something about it. Now you come to me with something like that. You've got a tension, you need something from me or want something from me. My obligation is to listen to you. Now, if I have in my role definition an already defined accountability or purpose about the thing, I've got to do it. I have to do it. I do not have to do it in the way that you think I ought to.
Right.
And I don't have to give you a firm deadline of when I will complete it by. But your questions and your point, it's kind of where we in iGroup and men's work do the support accountability dance and struggle, and where any working team says, where do I end and you begin? The dance of intimacy. And it's sometimes hard with our peers to say, man, you're really not carrying your weight. You know, I'm really feeling impacted by you're not doing this thing that you're supposed to. Holacracy requires me to tell you that. And that's the part that I think is really live and engaging about this. I often hold stuff like that back.
Mm-hmm.
So this processing of tensions means I'm going to address it. I don't know exactly what the solution is that I'm going to get. I'm going to address it. I'm going to talk to the elephants in the room. I'm going to listen to your elephants. And we're both going to approach it with the best, looking at our organizational purpose, with the best intention on addressing the tension. And we will then be responsible for figuring it out together. Wow.
A couple of thoughts. I think I did have a chance to watch Brian Robertson's TED Talk, and he talks about how this all started with him not paying attention to an instrument when he was on a solo flight, and that even though he regarded it as a small matter, that it almost cost him his life. So, you know, the appreciation of little things and the value of not dismissing things because I think they might not be important. But it also carries that question about, doesn't this slow things down? This sense of, oh my God, another little thing. You know, let's get on with the bigger stuff we've got to do. Do we have time to process one more little thing in my judgment, right? That I want to just dismiss it because I've got bigger fish to fry.
So that sort of goes into the issue with consensus, right? And and I guess I'll misuse the word here, the tension between the two models, right? Full consensus thing, and we've seen that in this work, right? Particularly MKPI, right? Or any part which is total consensus driven, and if there's a naysayer in the group, you can't get anything done, right? And then this model, you've got somebody who has authority over a particular domain. They're required to listen. And I assume that if you've got a naysayer in the group, it still can cause significant delay, right? Because you're having to process that listening, which is, I think, what Tom's talking about, right? But figuring out how to be more dynamic in addressing listening, but also getting things done. And that's probably the art of holacracy versus the science of holacracy.
You know, it's a combination of art and science. I think that's an interesting. Yes, sometimes it can feel like we are all using toothpick-sized chopsticks to build some intricate sculpture together in the exact right way. And Brian Robertson would say, just, okay, so slow down so that you can go fast later. And he encourages you, to be a Ferrari. Be a Ferrari. In many ways, Holacracy is very, very fast, actually, to the degree that all people are fully committed. That's why there is so much reliance on responsibilities of role filling and duties of circle members. And it's really up to the individual filling a role to pursue the purpose vigorously and to use the procedures rigorously. Sometimes that does feel a really micromanaged process when we're going through the roll call on some objection or no objection, that it can seem and feel tedious at times, that we're paying very detailed attention to something very small. And if you were to observe the LOC, the lead operating circle, and we're still sometimes not that great at it, sometimes we are excellent, but we will sometimes cover 20 or 30 tactical items in our Monday morning meetings in our hour session, including a review of that week's metrics, measurables, and completions. So what I think most people observe pretty quickly is actually how fast it goes, the doing business of, and the working on the detailed structure is sometimes the slow part, or feels slow.
Well, speed is gained though, because I don't have to be asking permission all the time. I may have to ask for forgiveness, but I never have to ask for permission. So I can just get it done as long as it fulfills my role and my purpose, or it's my domain. I don't need to double check with anyone.
There is the real speed of Holacracy.
Okay.
And of just how much can be done outside of meetings. There's no reason for me to wait for a meeting when I have a live current tension with you in your role. I will knock on your door. We will address it and move on. So the real speed in Holacracy is not just how efficient the tactical meeting structure is. It's in that we each have individual authorities and responsibilities to address what's going on.
Okay. It's interesting. For me, what it brings up is the fact that in my previous career, I was either greatly rewarded for doing that because it worked, or I was reprimanded because it didn't. You know, there was a very much instead of it being a teaching piece and saying, okay, well, that didn't fulfill your purpose or role or accountability. It's interesting to think that, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Yet when it worked last time, it was celebrated. I like the way that this seems to be doing that. I like the empowerment piece. Just get your shit done and stay in your lane, I guess.
And if you have to come into my lane, we'll work it out, right? I mean, no structure is perfect, but what this does allow is for a great deal of dynamic, live response to conditions, and then for us to figure it out on the fly. So this requirement to process, and we're kind of hitting around this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why would I be required to process attention? And what might happen if I don't? Your tensions and my tensions. Why am I required to process? It's probably a dumbly simple answer when you hear it.
Well, I'm going back to his initial example of the small gauge in the aircraft. any given small thing in a smooth running mechanism can blow up, can magnify quickly and can become critical. So addressing, going back to the fine tuning of the Ferrari, right? If I'm hearing a little tick in the valve, I want to address it before it blows the engine.
Yeah. Well, and I think in our MKP space, it's like keeping something in shadow, and what the impact that has on an individual, on me, if I keep something in shadow versus dealing with it. Okay.
Right. I mean, it might blow up in my face, right? Like I might crash, the ticking might break down, or I might just not get shit done. What if I just, if I don't address the tensions, I'm just not getting anything done. And then addressing your tensions, well, it can blow up. All sorts of team dysfunction can escalate. Interpersonal resentments, it can just snowball when a partner is not addressing other people's tensions, let alone their own. So in wrap here, we're at time. I just want to note a couple of things, that a lot of these concepts some of them will stick to you like glue, and you go, oh, I get that, and I really like it. And others may just not land at all. And I'm just going to encourage you to recognize that studying material like this is psychoactive. It's like studying integral theory or spiral dynamics. It has an actual impact on the way that you perceive the world. So I encourage you to allow yourself to experience this study of holacracy as an experience and not really as an academic thing. No one's going to grade you or look at you or say, hey, he's really getting it. Oh, he isn't. Just allow the concept to wash over you to whatever degree makes sense to you. And at the end of it, if you really like it, keep going and come back. And if you don't, just know that you've kind of been exposed to a different way of thinking that may not work for you, and that's fine. And the checkout in holacracy is a closing reflection. Like the check-in, it isn't the story. It's just, something that landed for you during this session. And then at the end of the day, there'll be a link to the 2 videos and the homework assignment for next week. So, Boysen, would you call us out for the check out?
I would, and boy, am I glad that audio got. That's you sound great, Mr. Jarvis. Leading the checkout. Why don't we start with Brian Harold?
Yeah, thank you. Checking out with intrigue. And in my old world, I'm thinking about how this could apply to the Central Texas community. And in my new world, I'm thinking about how it might apply to South Central area. One I can think sort of concrete, the other one scares me. And it's just the unknown. But I'm intrigued, and I'm out.
Oh, Chris Bozer.
I guess a reflection for this one is just how much this goes contrary to everything that I was taught. I sat through my first holacracy run meeting about a month and a half ago with the Multicultural Council, and I about had a freaking fit. I feel like we didn't get shit done, and I'm seeing how this, when implemented, works, and that's a nice reflection. I feel a deeper understanding of at least how the individuals fit into this piece. So with that, I'm out.
Oh, Chris Harold. You are still muted, Chris. There you are.
I've discovered how much work I have to do to grasp this. Much of it is intuitive to me, but the terminology is I grapple with. But I have full confidence that it will come. And I'm up.
Oh, Tom.
Yeah, I'm just at the very end. I was struck with the thought, thinking about some of the, I guess, the interpersonal dynamics that can interfere with organizations, particularly thinking back on lectures I received about sexual harassment and the importance of awareness of your colleagues and so forth, and seeing how many of those things would be so naturally addressed in this way. There wouldn't be a huge need for a huge meeting if people were responding quickly to tensions, I guess would be a way to say it.
Hmm.
Anyway, so I'm impressed. I'm enjoying what I'm hearing, and I feel like I'm getting more comfortable with it. I'm out.
Oh, Les.
Yeah, I think the one thing I've already gained from this is identifying in myself tensions and then trying to sort out, where do I take it? How do I express that in the different activities that I'm involved in? I'm out.
Oh, boys, and I'll go next and then hand back to you, Keith. Brother Raven, I'm checking out a mentor of mine, Will Flanders, talked about men's work as a point of no return. Eventually you get to a place where you cannot think of the world the same way that you used to think of the world. And Holacracy has totally done that in my life. I can't think about organization like I used to. So I'm out with that. Keith.
Yeah, my closing reflection is that, even with the technological bumps, I really appreciate just another opportunity to engage on these concepts. And that a conversation this morning about my dad, some of these things about, trying to please my dad. My dad really wouldn't get this, I don't think. Maybe not. Or maybe he wouldn't like it. Or maybe I'm just assuming he wouldn't like it. Because he was very, he was a boss, he was a CEO, he was a driver, and he really liked having total control. And this requires sharing. And that's not always easy for me, because I've got a lot of my dad in me. So thank you all, and look for the announcement in the videos, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for your patience with the tech problems.
Thank you.
Thank you.